And I'll just put this in.
Yeah, he was talking to us.
All right. So let's start. I've got this is a fun one. This one's going to be fun in that there are some parts of this paper that I don't understand, but that's par for the course. Chalk Talk 370. Oh my gosh. We'll hit 400 in 2017. Recon detailed dynamic face blah blah blah. Let's just stop there. All right. So first of all, not everybody looks at the videos. So I've propped up the video here so that you guys know what the heck we're talking about. And I'm going to switch the input one more time. Hopefully this will work. Can you guys in Vancouver see the video? Say thumbs up. Yes. YouTube people, we are now looking at the YouTube video for reconstructing detailed dynamic space geometry. Just go to YouTube and search for it and it'll pop right up. All right, let's press play. So check this out. First of all, not real time. Everybody, not real time. Keep saying that. But still, this is pretty cool.
It looks like real time.
It looks like real time in that it's playing back in real time, but the computation of the face mask is not done in real time, and we'll see why. The neat thing about this is that, check it out. He's holding it, he's moving his head around. It is a single video. You can take this basically with your web camera or your cell phone or whatever. It's just, and he's tilting his head up and stuff like that. There's some really nice stuff here. And in fact, if you've ever downloaded an app from like a makeup place or something like that, you can get apps that will allow you to apply makeup to your face and it will actually stick to your face. I don't know if they're using this technique. Again, that stuff is running in real time, but this is cool stuff. Now this is 3 years old too. So there are some new things that have come out since then. But this is this paper has some really interesting stuff in it. So we're going to experiment and take a look at what they're doing. There's some interesting stuff in here, like I said, that I'm not sure. You can see, basically, let's stop while I was editorializing and we sort of skipped over it. So first of all, the way this works is they have a default blend shape that was artist created. So they say, we built this thing. It is basically a generic looking person, right? And then they somehow bend it so that it looks more like the person that's being videoed. We'll talk about how that works in a moment. Notice it doesn't look exactly like him. Where's all the details and stuff? What are we doing? There we go. Then, this is the stuff that's actually real time. You can actually do this 2D feature tracking in real time. They use these features, they correct them, because 2D feature tracking always, it's plus or minus. So they correct it to the face that they're looking for. And then they use those 2D features to figure out the blend shape. And we'll look at how they do that. Then they do 2 stages of shape refinement to sort of fix the blend shape, which was fairly generic to start out with, warped to look like this guy, and then they push it even further. They really sort of suck it to the face that they actually can see. You can see that the face they get is slightly, the depth of it just doesn't look quite right, at least to my eye. And in fact, we'll see that in the mathematics. We'll see why the depth, the nose probably doesn't stick out nearly as much as it should. But on the other hand, you slap a decent texture on it, and it kind of hides some stuff. That looks actually pretty good. And it works for different shapes of faces, right? That's still the same generic blend shape model. We're now looking at the next person along. And you look at the mask and it's capturing a lot of the details. Some of the sharp creases in the area around his mouth and his cheeks. It's not perfect by any means, but the fact that they're doing this just with one single sort of unconstrained model is not too bad. It's not too bad at all. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now I'm going to switch back the video. As you got that in your brain. And we'll talk about how they do this. And so now that you guys have heard that, and again, there's the paper starts off with a lot of related work, but we're going to skip right over that, and we'll talk about their specific technique. So there are four phases. But let's write them over here so we don't have to erase them. Phases to this process. So phase 0, they call it S0 is their first step. They construct a parameterized 3D blend shape model for every actor, which is used to reconstruct all sequences starring that actor. So first of all, we have a generic blend shape that they build once. And they're using 78 shapes in this blend shape model. And it's a linear blend shape, and we'll go into the details of that. Step 1 is to take this and warp it, deform it, so it fits the person we're looking at, the actor. And in terms of fit, you can see from the video that it is, it's not capturing all the high resolution details and stuff, but it's starting to look a lot more like the guy's shape of his face. All right, so step 1, or that was step 1, but step S is in 1. Says, okay, now we have to do the blend shape tracking. So we track 2D image features. So 2D image features are tracked. And there are different ways of doing this. They're using 66 features on the face that are located. That includes you saw the dots on the guy's face. It's places where the eyes are, places where the mouth is. There's the shape of the jaw, and a couple of other features that are tracked. We've done talks on how to do this, and you can actually do that in real time, fairly robustly. Okay, we track this. And then throughout the monocular video, by combining sparse facial features with automatic keyframe selection and reliable optical flow. So the 2D image feature tracking is refined. This step has multiple things. So first of all, this is refined. And this is actually a pretty cool part of the paper. And then from an established sparse feature set, stuff we're tracking, we estimate a global 3D transformation, the head pose, and a set of model parameters, the facial expression for the blend shape model. So this stuff is refined, and then it's used to compute the pose of the head and the blend shape settings. So the expression, which is blend shape settings. Weights. All right, so far so good. And then finally, that was step S1. So step S2, dense tracking correction. Next, we improve the facial expression and head pose obtained from sparse blend shape tracking by computing a temporally coherent and dense motion field in video and correcting the facial geometry to obtain a more accurate model to video alignment. So they do optical flow. They've already done some optical flow up here, but they do even more optical flow, which is this is kind of a cool way of doing optical flow, which maybe we'll get to today. And this is used to fix or refine the blend shape. We're getting a little vague here because we really have to figure out where we are here before we can really talk about how this works. But we're going to refine the blend shape values or stuff. And then finally, and there's no way we're going to get to this today, dynamic shape refinement. So at this point, notice, generic blend shape fits the actor. Then we compute an initial go-round of the blend shape weights. Then we use some optical flow magic kind of stuff to refine the blend shape, but we're still working with this sort of warped blend shape thing. But they say, no, we want more. We want these wrinkles and stuff like that. So in a final step, we reconstruct fine-scale, time-varying facial details, such as wrinkles and folds. We do this by estimating the unknown lighting and exploiting shading from shape refinement. Or, shading for shape refinement. So they do shape from shading techniques to wiggle, I'm going to use a technical term here, the mesh so it better fits what's seen, and add high detail and add high res detail. All right, and like I said, we'll probably not get to this, but in general, you can kind of think about this. Think about what we've got. We got this blend shape rig, we work it to the actor, we refine it some more, and all of a sudden we've got this 3D mesh that is a little smooth, right, and stuff, but we have a 3D mesh. So if we start looking at the local changes of texture on the picture that was taken, we can say, hey, from this pixel to the next pixel, it got a little darker. So that must mean the normal is pointed in a certain way. And so if you do that, and you say, okay, this is assuming a certain amount of understanding of the lighting conditions, but you can basically build up this sort of where the normal should be in order to get the kind of shadows and highlights that we're seeing. And once you do that, you can sort of resolve the mesh. You can say, given this, let's try to just wiggle the mesh just a little bit so that we get better normals that match what we kind of expect. And that's shape from shading. And as long as you're starting from a mesh that is pretty close to what is actually seen, this stuff actually works. And that's where you're getting all the sort of fine details and wrinkles and the sort of creases in his mouth. That enhances that. All right? Okay, so let's go through this. They have 10 sections in this paper where they talk about each one of the, well, actually 8 sections of actual detail, and then there's a couple of result sections and stuff. So we're going to go through each section and talk about the various things. Step 1, we're going to take a side, I've got even a little side detour that we're going to do as well. First of all, blend shape. Remember what blend shapes are. Let's just make sure everybody's up to speed on that, because these guys are going to show up a lot in here. So the basic idea with a blend shape, and this is a linear blend shape, there's nothing fancy going on in here, is that we have a neutral pose. And they call that N. I'm going to put a little hat on there because they use a bold N, and so the little hat means bold. So this is a neutral pose. And of course, really quickly, if we wanted to create a blend shape, what you can do is either sculpt or scan the actor in a different pose, right? And in this case, the left eyebrow is raised. So left eyebrow up. Well, this is a mesh. Of course, there's mesh detail in here, and this is the same mesh, and hopefully they're topologically the same. So if you've got this mesh and you've got an artist who's created this mesh, as long as they started with the neutral pose and just sort of hold and deform the points, you can subtract these two, right? You can say, or other way around too, you can subtract the left eye, the neutral pose from this one. So if I took this and subtracted out the neutral pose, what would be left is something that I can't draw, right? It's a whole bunch of vectors. It's this thing where it's how the vertices of the mesh move, which is a delta pose or a delta shape. Right? So if I do that, and when you're putting together blend shapes, of course, you want to have the shapes not interfere with each other. So you have specifically have a left eye up and a right eye up. You don't have both eyes up at the same time, or you can have that, but then the blend shapes get a little bit more complicated. You want things that layer on top of each other. And these guys did this with 78 shapes. So now, getting into a little bit of math, you can say, well, I want a pose, right? And they call it E. That's the mesh for a given set of blend shapes. And this, actually, the paper's terminology flops and fizzles here, but this is actually a vector, and we'll show you what those guys are right now, is equal to the neutral pose. And you could say, well, plus beta 0 plus the left eye delta, right? Left eye up. If I just had that, if I left beta 0 at 0, then all this would be the neutral pose. Let's put those little hats on top of there. This doesn't get a hat because that's just a single number. So if I had beta 0, yeah.
So the delta wouldn't get a hat, right?
Oh, the delta does get a hat. Thank you very much. Ooh, and you are.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, because it was totally gone from there. So if beta is 0, then that part goes away, and all you get is neutral pose as your shape. But as I start increasing beta from 0 to 1, I'm going to be starting to ramp in these vectors, and by adding it to the neutral pose will start moving into the left eye up shape. And so when beta 0 is 1, you get neutral pose plus delta. It's just flipping that around, and you get this left eye up shape. All right, now you can see what's coming. So you do this with beta 1 and your delta for right eye up. And you do it with beta 2 and the delta for left smile up, and all sorts of things. And you can start to see that there's going to be math where we say n equals sum of j equals 0 to n of beta 0 of I, or j, sorry, delta j. And in fact, I use delta because it looks prettier, but in the paper they use the lowercase b. I think we can survive. All right, super easy, right? That's easy. So that was just a quick little going into what blend shapes are, just to make sure that everybody's up to speed. And that's that. We're going to erase that really quickly. All right. So now that we have that understanding, we have a generic blend shape that somebody has put together, and it works. It makes shapes. If you're pleased with the way the face responds, it smiles. And the conceit here is that various people basically smile the same way. When you raise your eyebrow, everybody has an eyebrow to raise, and that's that. We'll fix the shapes based on individual people, but in general, the face from one person to the next works similarly, which is a fair assumption. All right, so now, Rashab and I went over to Rashab's desk, because Rashab has been working in face kind of stuff, and I said, there are 4 sentences coming up here where I'm not quite sure what's going on. And so we've had a discussion on this, and I put it to everybody who's watching, all these people watching, because this is going to be a bit of a discussion to sort of figure out exactly what's going on. So What we want to do is take our generic blend shape model and bend it towards the shape of the actor. Well, first of all, how do we get the shape of the actor? So by magic happens. We have, and here we go, I'm going to make this a little bit more detailed to show that this is an actual actor and neutral pose. There we go. A 3D scan of our actor in a neutral pose. Now, it isn't actual magic. One of the authors of this paper wrote a fairly slick paper a year before this paper on doing facial capture with stereo camera setup. And in the stereo camera setup, because it's in stereo, he was actually getting accurate 3D reconstructions of the face. But the authors also say that you can get this 3D scan of our actor from any situation. You can get it from whatever kind of thing. You could put them in a cyberware kind of thing. You could do whatever you want. You get this nice 3D scan of the actor that is going to be your thing. All right. Now we also have the generic blend shape model over here. We got mean and plus deltas. How do we get these two guys to be the same? How do we align these things? Step one. Registration is based on manually matching 29 3D landmarks on the eyes, nose, and mouth. Okay, so right off the bat, they say if I'm going to register these things, I'm going to take this point here, which is the corner of the eye, and I'm going to say that that point there lines up on that guy. And this point here, which is the other corner of that eye, is going to line up on that guy. And I'm going to do this for 29 points and basically build a 3D registration between my 3D shape here and my 3D scan, static scan of my actor. All right, that's not hard, and it's totally doable. All right. Then there is followed by a global correspondence search and Laplacian regularized shape deformation. This is where some of the confusion starts to come in. First of all, Laplacian shape deformation. Let's talk about that. We have actually talked about Laplacian shape deformation many times in the chalk talks. It's shown up in various papers. But quite frankly, especially because this is part of the confusion, I thought it would be fun, and especially since we're probably going to do two weeks on doing this paper anyway, to go back and just do a quick review of Laplacian shape deformation. And so I printed out one of my favorite papers on this, Laplacian mesh processing by Olga Sorky. Really little paper that really explains exactly how to do this kind of stuff. And the whole thing with Laplacian shape deformation is that you basically take a mesh, a 3D mesh, and transform it into a representation of sort of, well, differentials, they call them. So the idea is, if I've got a mesh, let's go just draw a quick little mesh here, and this is just a section of the mesh. And of course that's 2D, but imagine that there's a little bit of curvature on there to make it interesting. Each one of these vertices has a 3D location, so that's V0, this might be V1, and these guys are vectors, so they get little hats on top of them. 3D location, no problem. They're world space coordinates and everything. But it's kind of hard to determine information about the shape. Like, if I wanted to know what the normal is at that point, I'd have to do some calculations. And if I wanted to know the curvature of this thing, all these things that are kind of based on, you know, how the mesh changes from point to point rather than just the absolute value of the point, the mesh doesn't do it enough for us. We have to do some calculations on top of this. A Laplacian, using a Laplacian to represent those changes gives you a lot of power, actually. So I say, let's actually do a little computation up here. For each vertex, instead of storing the 3D location of it, what we're going to do is store how that point changes based on the area around it. So I'm going to take the vertex I, take that point there, and I'm going to subtract it from 1 over di, sum of or bj, where j is an element of the neighborhood of I. All right, look at that and you go, what? Wait, what? Actually, it's super easy, right? This is basically saying, take all the points, all the vertices that are neighbors to the point that we're concentrating on. So that would mean this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. So that's super easy. We just find they call this the one-ring neighborhood around this point. And we're going to sum up their locations. So we're going to go through and just take their x, y, and z location and sum them all up. So add this one, this one, this one, this one all together. And then this d is just the number of neighbors. So ta-da, this is an average of all these points. And by the way, there are various ways of building Laplacian. This one does not take into account the area of the triangle and all sorts of stuff. There are other ways of computing these kind of things, but this is the easiest one. This is the one we'll talk about. And then you subtract it from vi. Just think about what that just did. It's super easy, right? We took all these points around here, came up with an average, and I'll draw it over here, say that's the average of all those points. And we just did a subtraction from this. So this value here is not that location in world space. It's actually how to take the average and move it into the actual location. It's the differential between the average of its neighbors and its actual location. And this has all sorts of cool properties, right? It can tell you that's a good approximation of a normal. It can also be used to figure out curvature and all sorts of cool stuff about this thing. All right.
That's a vector, right?
What?
That's a vector.
Ooh, thank you. It is a vector.
It's actually the mean curvature normal, so you got both those things in one.
All built in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the magnitude of it is a measure of the curvature, and the direction of it is the normal. Yep. All right, so what does this do, though? This is kind of cool in that it tells us how the surface is pointing and how it curves. But if you start doing this with all of these things, if I start computing deltas for this guy, and here, and all these guys, I start computing the deltas, look what I'm doing. I'm sort of changing this from an absolute world space coordinate location to deltas at every point. This is one of the cool things about the shape deformation stuff is if I could go from deltas back to the world space coordinate, then I could constrain some of the when I do that, going back to the deltas, I could actually change the shape of this object while still preserving some of the details of the object. So if I wanted to bend this guy's face, or maybe more bend this blend shape, what I could do is represent the blend shape as this kind of delta representation. And then, take some of these registered points and say, I want to take this guy and I want to bend it so that it fits as close as possible to these registered points. But I still want to maintain all the details, right? Notice what I'm doing. I'm not adding extra details to match this guy's face. I'm basically taking my blend shape, which I know that works, and I'm going to warp it to this guy's overall generic face shape. But I still want this thing to look like a face at the end. I don't want it to turn into some sort of silly putty. I want it to look like the nose and everything, just warped to fit this guy. So that's how they do it. And erase this and keep up this. The cool thing about this is that you could represent this with a matrix. So the transformation of a vector of absolute Cartesian coordinates to the vector of differential coordinates can be represented in a matrix form. And the matrix form kind of looks like this. Actually draw the matrix so I can fill in some stuff. And this matrix is going to work on just a single coordinate of the vector. So right now there's Vx, Vy, and Vz in here because this is a three-dimensional point. But the matrix is going to be the exact same thing because it's all based on just the connectivity of the mesh. It isn't based on the x, y, and z coordinates. So this matrix will work separately for computing the x coordinate, the y coordinate, and the z coordinate of our points.
Yeah. Quick question. Are they taking into account anything to do with the actual camera or the?
Oh, you're getting ahead of us, buckaroo. Yes. Give me 5 minutes to go through this, and then we'll do this. Because at this point, notice there is no camera. We haven't gotten to the image features yet. This is our 3D scan of the actor. But oh my God, yes, this becomes really important. And one of the big key things of this paper is how they deal with the camera. And you may cringe a little bit. All right, so think about this. We are going to say that we're going to multiply this matrix, right? And we're going to, this is taking vertices and converting it into differential coordinates. So assume, and I'll put just Vx there so you know that that's just a number. So if I'm computing, and this is for 0. So if I'm computing the x differential coordinate for the 0th element, then I have this minus a whole bunch of subtracted things. So I'm going to put a 1 in there because when I multiply this through, I'm going to multiply 1 times Vx 0. But then say, just for once, let's do this. Let's put this there. So this is V0, and here's V1. So V1 is connected to V0. So there's going to be the Vx1 right there. Well, to incorporate this into the matrix, what do? Well, there's going to be a negative sign. I'm going to multiply this one by whatever is in this thing. But I have to make sure it's 1 over D1. Well, actually, there's a way of sort of separating out the D, but let's put that in here. We go 1 over the number of connections. And so in this case, there are 3 connections, so we put that. And we do a negative sign right there, right? And then we can do, maybe this is V2, make it simple. So there's a negative 1 over 3 there. And maybe this is V7, no, I don't want to count to 7. Let's go for 5. So that's V1, V2, V3, V4, V5. And these guys are all zeros. Every other point in the mesh gets multiplied by zeros. So think about what we're doing. We have this vector of coordinates, multiply it through here, and you get that equation. All right? So now, you have this thing. We're going to call this thing A. And we have our Vx, and we'll call this a vector Vx with a hat on it because it's now become a vector. And what you get on the other side is your differential coordinates with a hat on it, just the x coordinate of that. So the whole concept of this is that you build that A matrix. And you can see how you do that, right? You just go through your mesh and you just plop in values because you know which point you're at and which box you're in. You build that A matrix and you can get, we'll call it X, A times Vx, where those are the hats. Right, simple as that. Now I'm skipping over some stuff, but with Laplacian coordinates, the basic thing is once you've got this, oh baby, if I'm represented a mesh that looks like this, but I really want to know, I want to use the actual mesh to draw it in OpenGL. How do I get the Vx back? Well, if you're doing a little matrix multiplication, you just say A inverse group X equals Vx, because the inverse of the matrix cancels out. Except, everybody who's ever done anything with Laplacian coordinates will just went, ooh, wait, no, you can't do that, because this matrix, unfortunately, is singular. This matrix, you cannot take the inverse of it. Too bad. You can't take the inverse of it. It's not that bad. In order to make it not singular, what you have to do is constrain some of the points. So some of those rows in there, like say V0, I'm going to actually say that V0 actually exists at 10. you know, or the V0x is at the coordinate 10 in world space. So once I lock down just one point in this matrix, I basically extract V0 out of the matrix, and I put back in a coordinate that says, hey, V0 will always equal 10 into this. I make this thing invertible, or possibly invertible. The problem is, of course, in doing that, I actually change the shape of the matrix, so you have to do a little trickery to invert it, and we're not going to talk about this. By adding constraints to this, I can solve this equation, and I can take the deltas and translate them into world space coordinates. And if I take one point, and I convert my face into the delta coordinates, and I constrain one point, I can use that point to basically move this guy around in space. Every time I solve this equation, I'll get the exact same mesh that I started out with, just at a different location in space. But, this is the cool thing with Laplacian, if I start using more points as constraints, I start taking them out of that A matrix and locking them down, I will be bending the matrix. And because I'm doing this kind of solve based on the deltas of how all this, or the differentials of how this all moves, I will bend the face, but it will still look like the face. So,
It'll be smooth, though.
it will be smooth, yes. We're actually okay with that. We're going to add the detail. So Ron just said, but it will be smooth. This is a basic filter operation. We've taken vertices, turned it into here, and then taken them and put them back. So that in itself is going to smooth stuff out.
No, because you're using the delta coordinates from the generic.
Oh, no, you're not talking about just numeric smoothing. No. Yes, okay. You're going to be, remember, all we're trying to do at this point is fit the shape face, face shape in general. So the nose is hopefully the length of the nose. This generic blend shape, especially if you look at the examples in the paper, is pretty smooth to begin with.
That's what I meant.
Actually, not necessarily, because they do mention that they are establishing some kind of global correspondence. They don't mention how they do it, but they are allowing more correspondences to be figured out automatically.
Right.
Apart from the 29 that they manually do.
Right. So this is one of the mysterious things. There's two mysterious things in the next two sentences. They say, let's go back to the original thing. We match by hand 29 3D landmarks on the eyes, nose, and mouth, which then change how we solve this equation, followed by a global correspondence search. And so this may be an iterative kind of thing. We've done this in the past where you first work the face and then you draw a, like, hey, the cheek here is way off from the cheek there. So maybe we'll do a closest point thing and then snap those 2 points there or something. This is a little bit speculative on our part about what is global correspondence search is.
Although one thing that does strengthen this assumption is them mentioning that they're using Laplacian regularization. So what they are actually using is some kind of a soft constraint on the delta that you have. And the framework that you just mentioned about solving the vertex positions from the deltas allows for those kind of soft constraints on the globally estimated correspondences, which may not be correct, but then you can still hope to have estimated the right correspondences.
Maybe. These are questions that we need to ask if we want to implement this kind of thing. But in general, okay, the very excellent little diversion there, you kind of take your neutral.
Sorry.
No, you go.
Don't have enough correspondence information from the original scan to make it so that you can compute A inverse, because there's one time when you know where A inverse delta x Vx is actually you have it well defined, right?
Well,
isn't delta x based on the laser print or the scan of the face, not on the model? Right?
No. Delta x is based on the blend shape. The key thing is the blend shape has a certain mesh topology. This may not have the same mesh topology at all.
Okay,
What we're doing is basically saying, hey, we happen to know that that coordinate here lands at world space coordinate point. And so this is a very excellent question. If we had the exact topology from here to here, if this was an exact match, then this becomes way easier.
but that's what the global correspondence is for,
Wow.
is to
And
make that
that's-
match, right?
That's to make the match, and maybe that means that for every point in this space, we know where it lies on here. But I bet I'm dubious of that, right?
The
Because-
constraints that we know about are not in the deltas, but in the Vx part. Because we
Right.
know what the vertex positions on the scan are. So we don't have any assumptions about deltas. We only have constraints on Vx. So
But we're computing the deltas from the,
The deltas are just being computed from.
right, which means that the only thing that we have left is AM, the entries for AM verse,
right, yeah.
right? So you have,
No,
No,
No.
A inverse is super easy to define. That's defined on.
A is defined just by the topology of the blend shape mesh.
but the AM verse is defined for that topology, but not for that one.
Right,
So
so
what-
you're taking those blend shapes, and by constraining some of those points, you're warping it to match the shape of this guy. We're just using that to figure out the position of a few points, and then we're warping the generic blend shape to match it.
Right, so, and let's go into this a little bit more carefully. In this, we know this, and we know that, right? The A matrix is based on how this mesh is topologized. This is based on the location of each and every one of these points, right? We have that. And we know this because we computed it from up here. We knew these points, we ran it through our A matrix, and we got that. So we know all three of those guys. What we're doing is we're taking that matrix, A matrix, and we're taking a column out of it in a row that corresponds to a vertex over here in Vx. We're taking that guy out, and we're putting it down here. We're going to take it and put it down here, and we're going to set it to 10. And then we're going to do the same thing with another point over here. This guy right here, we're going to take that row out and that column out, and we're going to put that back down here and put the value there. We're going to put a 1 there and set this one to 13 because that's the location. And these guys are coming from the location of those points on the guy's face. So the more points that we know, the less relying on the deltas. You know, if we knew every single correspondence of the vertices of this mesh onto this guy's face, there's none of us. We just sort of say, hey, we know exactly how to work this. What we don't, and what we do know, is that somebody has gone through and carefully, methodically said that that point should land over there. So we're going to take that row over there and
They
pop it up.
took 29 points.
They took 29,
That was
and
enough to
then,
do it.
what?
They're saying that for them in this case, 29 points was enough
Well, they
to
said
make it so A was
29 and a global correspondence search. So the more, the better. But what that global correspondence search means is a big sort of question mark on its face. And how many points do they eventually take out of this matrix and start shuffling down there? I'm not sure. Again, if they got rid of every one of these points and just made this thing, we'd know exactly how to move that to there. It'd be easy. Oh, unfortunately. Okay, so now, think about what we can do, right? Yeah, see.
But it's, I'm sorry, the thing that struck me about their hand waving was not finding the correspondence of the points, but finding the parameterization of the blend shapes that match that.
You're jumping into two. Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there. We still have one more sentence to cover in this.
Okay.
So what this does is it warps the neutral pose. Oops, neutral. Right? It warps the neutral pose so that it fits the shape of our 3D scan guy. This is a static case of him standing there with a neutral pose on. So take the neutral pose to the neutral pose. We're getting right here. There are 78 blend shapes in our rig that have yet to be warped. So they add a sentence. Once the neutral shape is registered, the blend shapes of the generic model are transferred using the same procedure. Okay. So that gave me pause. Now, first of all, we have a way of doing this. We, digital domain, we have this thing called deformation transfer that's based on a Keen thing, and it basically says, okay, if I'm going to look at how I deform this and how I deform that, I'm going to try to match the deformation. So there's a deformation transfer, but this isn't exactly the same, right? They're using the Laplacian to do this, and they have correspondences that have been built in here. And now we have a shape here that we need to move. It's actually a delta, but say we can compute the shape out of this after this. We have the shape that we need to move where the guy's eyebrow is up. We don't have a corresponding 3D scan of this. So we don't have corresponding points on here to control how this thing is going to be warped. So the next thing is to say, okay, well, I'll read further and they'll explain it a little bit more, and they never do. It's gone. So the question, and again, Laplacian guys and stuff like that, if I have a shape, neutral pose to neutral pose, totally get that. I have the registered points, I have the 3D location, bam, I get that. Now I have a shape that doesn't match where I'm going to. And they say, it's kind of non-ambiguous, once the neutral shape is registered, the blend shapes, the generic model, are transferred using the same procedure.
Can you just make a delta between, I mean, the delta file for the blend shape
Maybe that's it.
tells you how much
So-
to move the other shape.
So this is delta file for neutral pose. Maybe it's just use delta file for pose times A inverse equals Bx. So this is the thing we're creating, the new shape of the thing. But the question mark here is, what are my registered points?
Yeah, because the constraints are in world space.
Well,
Well, there are no constraints at this point because we don't even have the scans for those blend shapes.
Right.
That's exactly.
So you just take the points that are near the area where they're moving and sort of not use them and just use the rest of the points, so you kind of warp it?
Take your original warp, add the deltas to that, maybe.
yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Is that
Original warp and
So you warped your neutral to the shape. You've already got your deltas for all
Right.
the,
we have the delta
Right.
shapes and deltas.
add those to your warped shape for, but then there wouldn't be any Laplacian involved in that. You just add the deltas on.
Right,
And
and it would look
honestly,
weird.
I don't think it would look good.
It would look weird because those deltas are based on our generic thing, and we kind of want when he raises.
Oh. No, I got
You
it.
got it?
Yeah, you add those deltas on, and now for those same constraints, you've got a position. Now you redo the Laplacian mesh edit, but you'd need to use the deltas or the delta coordinates from that new mesh because they're not going to be the same as the original one from the neutral mesh.
I
So
see.
you're
So
just-
recompute the
Just
deltas.
figuring out 29 constraint positions by adding the blend shape delta onto the warped mesh, and then resolve the optimization.
All right.
Maybe.
The reason I'm pausing to stop this, and I think we'll stop talking about this for now, is this is interesting. If this works, this would give us another quiver in our toolbox. If you can actually use this to warp things. We've got the deformation transfer, but this is a different.
Why is this better?
Well, I
Why
don't know if it
potentially-
is better.
I don't know.
I don't
Why
know if it is
potentially
better.
could this technique be better?
Well,
This
because
could be faster.
Yeah,
could maybe have different controls on how it's bent.
if the actor's eyebrows raise higher than the generic blend shape's eyes raise than that,
Yeah.
this is all crap.
Because his forehead is bigger, say.
Right.
The gradient form will do that already.
Yeah, I really doubt that they would get results like the ones that they showed with just applying 29 deltas and then you have these new constraint positions. One thing that could be done is just fix one point, maybe a nose tip, and then solve for these new differential coordinates and these new Laplacian coordinates. But just constraining one point for that solve has never really worked out very well. Does that make sense? So I'm saying instead of constraining 29 points, like you're saying, by adding deltas from the generic model, you constrain only one point on this neutral mesh of the target, and still solve for the rest of the points using the Laplacian.
That's just going to be a translation of the neutral shape. If you're only constraining one point.
No, but we using the differential coordinates of the plane shape. So if I have an eyebrow raised shape in the generic plane shape model, I recompute all the differential coordinates on that.
Oh, you'd have to, yeah.
And
But
then you
you would
just
do
flip
it
it.
from, I think you would do it from the generic
Hmm.
target. You would have to recalculate the differential coordinates.
All right, well, I am now going to stop this because we're running up out of time. As you can tell, that this is sort of an interesting paper. And we haven't even gotten to the really juicy stuff, the 2D feature tracking, refining, and computing the blend shape stuff, where they're doing some interesting things with camera models. So sometimes you wonder what we're going to be talking about next week. Now we know what we're going to be talking about next week. Step 1 and step 2 will never, ever get to step 3, because I don't care about step 2. But step 1 and step 2, we've covered step 0, sort of. Thank you, guys. This is kind of, I like this kind of talk where we figure things out. This is fun. So see you again next week at this time. And yeah, thanks, guys. Bye, y'all.
You could use
Yeah.